and stories of success, when people say to me, that's not us, it is us. It is us. You know what? We're both those things. We're all those things, and we're much more than just those things. The bigger fight, in my mind, should be to push for all of our stories to be told, the range. Not just tell the sad ones, and not just tell the happy ones, and also not just not tell the sad ones, but to tell the range. Some Latinos are in this country because they ran across a border to find work here. Some Latinos are in this country because they hopped on a plane to go to college. Some Latinos were born in this country. Some Latinos are in this country before this country became this country. And frankly, they're the people who greeted the people who are coming off the Mayflower. That is the range and much more of what our story can be. But all of us are here because at some point they saw that America offered something that did not exist somewhere else for them. All of our stories are valid, and they all deserve to be told. We also, in our documentary, told the story of Bill and Betty Garcia. He's Puerto Rican, she is Dominican. And we showed how they struggle with their two boys who are teenagers, who are dark-skinned brown boys. When they left New York, Washington Heights, for Charlotte, North Carolina, they opted to not teach their boys Spanish. And in that, they now see, 15 years later, that they somehow lost this connection to their roots, that they're struggling to figure out how to fix that. In Charlotte, as one of the sons put it, if you're brown, then you're black, or you're Mexican. And their parents struggle to figure out how to teach them that there's nothing wrong with being black or Mexican, but you're Puerto Rican and Dominican. You're not either of those things. And the mother said to me, have we failed somehow? Have we failed ourselves, and have we failed them? Because we all know in this day, as I struggle with my own 4 kids, it's hard to teach someone Spanish. It's hard. She said, you pick up naranja, every single word. And when one little boy was slow to learn English, they worried, slow to talk at all, they worried. So they just only spoke in English. Plus, the husband doesn't really speak fluent Spanish. It was just easier in the daily living. And now they look back and say, what have we lost? When our boys don't connect to their culture, is it because we decided we didn't want to take the time to say naranja, naranja? They worry. But I think they have not failed, no more than my parents failed when we pushed back hard at the things that they culturally valued. My mother used to say to us when we would do something she did not like, where did I get these stupid little Americans? I'm like, oh yeah, nice, right? I'd be like, because you came here and you had us is where you got us. We're Americans trying to define what that means in a country where ethnicity and race and skin color and the nuance in skin color and accent and where you're from and how you got here all speak volumes about what you can be and what you are. The wonderful thing, I think, for us, new generation Latinos, is that we don't have to ignore the past. My husband never claims to be Scottish, German, American. Never, ever. Has not a huge interest to go to Scotland first to visit his people, although he hears the golf courses are very nice and might want to go for that one day. We are not teaching our children to speak Scottish, but all 4 of our children are learning Spanish because I don't speak Spanish well, and it frustrates and sometimes angers me. If you ask my 4 kids who run the range, some are white-looking, some are mixed-looking, they'll tell you, I am black and Latino. Which was actually a little challenging when my daughter would march through as a first grader to try to count the number of diverse students at her school. I'm like, let's get them all in first before we start pushing for the diversity thing in elementary school. I am black and Latina. I'm like, ugh. As a journalist, I often wanted to be the voice for the voiceless. And that can mean poor people in Haiti who really have nobody speaking for them. People who are in Chile trying to figure out how they're going to make do when they don't feel the government is answering their needs. People who are stuck on rooftops in New Orleans. People who are digging through rubble for bodies after the tsunami hits. Or it can be us, too, in a way, voiceless. People who defy being defined easily. People who speak English and Spanish and dance salsa and listen to Beyonce and Jay-Z, who can talk about soaking black beans on the phone with their mothers, but also lament about having to order Chinese food because we're running late and now the kids got to sit down and eat. That's who we are. We run the gamut. We're all of these things. And so I think what's required of us is that we bridge understanding for everybody else. I mean, back to the hate crime story. It troubles me that all those young people don't see themselves somehow in a human being who they decided is not a human being. We have the responsibility of telling the story, sharing the culture, old stories, new stories, fused stories, and making everybody understand that we have a connection to each other. We're 100% Latino and 100% American. And guess what? That math does add up. My husband's always like, you know that doesn't add up. I'm like, no, it does. It adds up. The stories shape and define us, our educational levels, our job opportunities, what policies we will support politically, what messages we're hearing about immigration, for example, what resonates, what angers us, what doesn't. And I think the great power in being a new generation Latino is that sometimes others are perplexed by us. And as I learned early on in my job, trying to get a gig as a reporter, today it feels good to confuse people because it allows us to define ourselves and it allows us to say, as you all sit here and struggle with what the general market is, guess what? We're the general market. We are growing at a rate, and you will see in the census and you'll see in the following census, we're the general market. And if you ignore us and continue to slot us in these little areas where you think, oh, I got it, here's what we're going to do, here's how we do, you're wrong. And now people care about being wrong in a way they didn't care about being wrong in the 80s when I was coming up, because there's money attached to it, because the critical mass now has reached the point where if you're wrong, you not only miss out on a part of a market that you could be reaching, but you will not succeed as a company. You will not succeed as a company. It's mathematically impossible to be 100% American and 100% Latino, but I think many in this room would describe themselves that way. New generation Latinos aren't constrained by simple math. I think, seriously though, we're constrained by how others see us. We're not trying to assimilate and become the general market. We're trying to make everybody see that we are that market. And what we have to offer, I think, if you just forget markets altogether, we have to offer to the culture, to the mindset, to the worldview, and frankly, in my business, the voices that need to be heard on television and in any kind of reporting is important, is valuable, and goes on to underscore, to me, what obviously this nation is all about, the strength of the diversity and the strength that carries over into the next generations. David started the conversation by talking about the fair share and the spend reaching the population. For me, the fair share comes in what we see reflected on the air, and then who we see in positions of power. You want to see something that doesn't add up? Look at the number of CEOs across the board. Look at the number of Latinos on corporate boards. You know, that is math that doesn't add up. Look at the number of executive producers in any news organization. When you have a market that is growing the fastest, it seems insanity to me. How do you reach people? You tell their stories. You tell stories that are universal stories that are interesting to everybody. And yet I look behind the scenes and look in front of the camera. Those people don't exist. And not just, you know, in the places where I've worked, but everywhere. The math doesn't add up. I have a new unit now at CNN called In America, and my unit just happens to be the most diverse unit at CNN, because I hired my friends, who happen to be very talented producers. And I have the unit where we have the overwhelming number of people who are bilingual in the company work in my unit, again, because I hired my friends. David says, make a noise, and I agree. Stories demand coverage and behind-the-scenes representation, and we, new generation Latinos who have a foot firmly planted in one world and firmly planted in the other world, and we don't waver. We're not teetering between those two worlds. We're very solidly comfortable. I think we need to be the ones to demand it and say, you want us, then great. Tell our stories. Put our people in leadership positions. Stop talking about a pipeline. The pipeline, if I hear another pipeline conversation, I'm going to get out of the room and I'm just going to walk out. We have to be the ones who can make that difference because we're the best positioned to do that. I want to thank you for joining me this morning. I really appreciate the time to address you and enjoy the rest of the conference.